Now, with the uncertainty of the long-term economic impact of the global COVID-19 pandemic, a new economic analysis says the speed, quality, and sustainability of Nigeria's economic recovery will be determined by the effectiveness of its government's response. Now, before COVID-19, the number of Nigerians living in poverty was expected to increase by about 2 million, largely due to population growth. So, without bold reforms, strong fiscal and monetary policy actions, the report warns that the macroeconomic implications of COVID-19 in 2020 and 2021 will be severe. The issue of economic growth and human development has been a central concern in the oil and gas sector of Nigeria's extractive industry. And this has featured prominently in the agitations and generalized resistiveness in the Niger Delta, the oil-producing region. Well, while many studies have also focused on these problems, policies aimed at confronting them have not received broad attention. The World Bank has advised Nigeria to develop its mining sector to help mitigate post-COVID-19 economic shocks, rather than wait for a rebound of oil prices in the global market. Well, to discuss this and other issues is the Chief Executive Officer of CSR-in-Action, Bekeme Masade-Olowola. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. So let's begin with this. This pandemic has thrown up issues on sustainability and governance in the extractive industries. My question to you is, how embedded is sustainability in the extractive industries within Nigeria?
Thank you again for having me on the show. That's a really big one. Because there are quite a number of aspects to sustainability, and the easiest measurement would be economic, social governance. And in terms of economic, in the past we've had, that's why our federal revenue is hinged upon the extractives, particularly oil and gas. So, they've been doing well economically, but that also has been hampered by the COVID-19 crisis, as you've mentioned. Oil prices have gone as low as they can ever get in at least our recent history, going as low as $23 and less at some point in some parts of the world, minus $3. And so obviously that has taken the heat. And, this hasn't helped when you look at the social, the fact that there has been restiveness in oil-producing regions hasn't helped. So even at the best of times, we weren't actually producing to full capacity. Okay, so obviously that's why the government in 2009, I think it was, introduced the amnesty program. However, that hasn't taken away all of the issues. You see that many oil and gas companies are working harder to make sure that they have some sort of relationship with their communities, their community stakeholders. That is where they would be able to show how social they are, how they're able to build social license to operate and all of that. So, there's been work there. They have made sure that they try to recruit people from that area of the country, but there's still work to be done. Let's just say that there's still work to be done. And then when you look at governance or environmental management, there obviously is still a lot more work to be done. Although here matters like the organic cleanup happening haven't entered its second phase, it's still shocking that you still have agitation with regard to the environment. So you still go to oil and gas communities and you'd still find that there is still room for improvement in terms of state-of-the-art equipment to be used. You still find you could wake up in the morning and villagers have complained that there's soot all over, they're washing. So there's still a whole lot to be done. And then when you take into cognizance the fact that a Goldman Sachs research actually said that over 73% of delays in that sector is caused by non-technical issues such as community resistance, that finds how important this is. So sadly, COVID-19, post-COVID-19 era, it's not going to be as sweet as we would like for it to be, because there's still work to be done. Like I did say, some companies are doing much better than others, but there's still the matter of better relations with their communities to be sorted out.
Absolutely. I think in addition to that, I guess there is some work to be done to improve the image of the extractive industries. I know that earlier this year you had the likes of Goldman Sachs saying that they would no longer be financing explorative projects like the drilling for oil in Antarctica, the likes of JP Morgan doing the same. So here in Nigeria, where it seems as though all of these other industries in all of these other countries and different continents have been able to benefit and industrialize off of the back of fossil fuels, it seems that now there's so much attitude towards fossil fuels being bad. It's like countries like Nigeria aren't really given the space to benefit like other countries have done from their own resource wealth. What do you think about that?
In terms of giving us the opportunity to benefit from our resource wealth?
Yes, yes, exactly.
But that's us, though. That is us. Over the years, we have made more than enough money to fund our development. So if you look at it in terms of the number of people, our population, to how much oil we produce, for instance, obviously it's incomparable to a country like Dubai. So they may produce, they produce a lot more and have a lot less people. Okay, but if we were smart, because it's about leadership, if we were smart, we could have actually invested whatever revenue we got out of that into other sectors of our economy. And that's why you see a much more rushed approach to things like agriculture, to things like tech, because we're leaping, we're trying very hard to catch up. And I'm not saying that Nigeria should be like any Western. Actually don't need many of the things that they need. We actually don't have to focus a lot on consumerism, that we don't need to buy and all of that. But we do have to have a certain basic level of comfort. And so in terms of investment, I do think that it's not too late. There are companies now that are investing in renewable energy, for instance. There are companies that are working with their communities to come up with empowerment solutions, because it's not just about a large company making tons of money and giving out palliatives. It's not about that. It's about developing the capacity of a wide range of people to be able to contribute meaningfully to the economy.
Definitely. It is time for us to take a very short break, Bekeme, but once we come back, we will continue this conversation. Please do stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We are still gladly joined by the Chief Executive Officer of CSR-in-Action, Ms. Bekeme Masade-Olowola. Thank you for staying with us. If we were to move on to look at oil prices now, they have been going up again, but do you think that we're able to take advantage of that increase?
Are we able to take advantage of that increase? I don't know. And I'll tell you why. Because again, the issues that we have in the sector relate to poor governance. Okay, so even though the federal government in, I think it was 2015, eventually started implementing the TSA, I can tell you that not all of our oil revenues pass through the TSA, that's the Treasury Single Account, because, or rather, you would hear that revenues such as those accrued in dollars do not pass through the TSA, and most of our oil revenues come from, or rather, through dollars, or paid through dollars. And so, how do you account for that when we have a governance system that cannot be accountable? So there's a matter of restiveness, as I did mention earlier, and oil theft. Only recently, I think it was last week, some rogues were caught with a full vessel of crude, having stolen from the pipeline at Mendy Creek. So we have all of these issues, youth restiveness caused by or rather lack of inclusive engagement within communities. There's the issue of women. And so you continue with the pipeline vandalization. So we're not able to basically maximize our resources, or the access to the resources that we have. So this is a real problem. So how, for instance, can you account for the fact that the losses from crude is tantamount to about a third of our annual revenue? okay, of $30 billion. So how do you account for that, and how can you manage? And that's why, as an organization, whilst we provide consulting services, we also try to make sure that we provide solutions for businesses, and it's really up to the business to take advantage of all the things that's out there. For instance, last 2 years ago, we did research. We went to all the oil communities and we asked them questions. How do you think your relationship with oil and gas companies are? And at best, they said it was hostile. Okay, because of the lack of inclusive engagement. And so we came up with this community engagement standards, which is supposed to guide businesses in the way that they do business. And we say, okay, this is actually the minimum standard. We're not saying go to this community and spend that amount of money on the community, but we're saying there are clear mechanisms that you must take into cognizance if you want to develop a relationship with the community and with other critical stakeholders that you work with, whether it's the government at whatever level. Okay, if you want to be able to beat your chest and say I'm a responsible company, then there's certain things. You must have clear grievance mechanisms. You must conduct a proper EIA. You'll be surprised to hear that businesses actually commence operations before they do some sort of whitewash EIA. And regulation says allow the community to see for 21 days, or rather make it available for 21 days so that people who have comments will be able to comment on it. But they don't have this. And so we said the first step is, establish community mechanisms, right? So there's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. The second phase is planning for the long term. So at some point, you have entered that community, you have engaged the right people that you need to engage with, and then you're saying, okay, what next? What is the next step? How do I ensure that our contractors are the right people? How do I use technology to make it work for me? And then one thing that businesses don't tend to do in the extractive industry is to now look at the long term. So you're not going to be in that community for forever. So what do? Do you leave it in a mess when you decommission? Do you hand over properly if you're handing over to a new company? All of these things are just taken for granted. You'll be shocked to know that all of these things are taken for granted. And yet there's a simple solution for us to be able to garner full economic value from our extractive industry. We must look at those people who make it happen at the grassroots. If you look at the mining sector, for instance, as well, it's filled up with artisanal miners who are not properly equipped to do the work that they do. So they expose themselves to all sorts of hazards, right? And these are the guys who manage to eke out a little bit of something that, bigger companies then from wherever, from Nigeria, from outside Nigeria, illegally then gain access to and then sell. And these revenues don't actually enter into our coffers. So there's a lot of, the industry is a lot of problems that we would have to correct in order to maximize value.
I like that, maximizing value. Speaking of maximizing value, what sort of work do you think went into the production of the CES? And so far, what has been the response?
Okay, so what sort of work? It was extensive work, as I did say. It was, we went to all of the 9 oil-producing states in the country. We talked to different stakeholders at the community, local government, states, federal, you name it, businesses as well. We called in businesses and we said, you know what? We've been hosting our annual Sustainability in the Extractive Industry Conference now for 8 years. And every year, even though we try to push out, feedback from the community, it still comes back to, oh, we don't feel like we're being taken into consideration in decision making, or we want our voice to be heard, or we still have the same issue. So we said, okay, why not just move this on from being just a talk fest and actually creating a solution? And that's why we came up with the CES. And I can tell you that it was well received by the different stakeholders that we met. And so, like I said, we did that research that showed what communities thought. And then when we produced this document, it was actually funded by the Foster 2 initiative of the DFID. And so right now we are at a phase where the Ministry of Petroleum Resources has bought in, because it does fit in with the 20-point agenda of the government to end conflict in the Niger Delta. And we're looking to have it approved formally. We're talking to the Office of the Vice President, and we're looking to form a mechanism for actually collecting community feedback and ensuring that these any issues that are raising or are rectified, because right now there's still also the matter of complaints, all over the place, and no one central desk, if you would like to call it that, that would manage that. So, there's on ground the work of looking into the different key agencies that typically deal with issues in the industries and getting them together to ensure that, problems don't escalate, because we can actually manage the conflict. It's just that we need to develop a cohesive approach. The CES also looks into the fact that oftentimes government agencies give licenses to businesses and are not on hand to handhold, because you need that. Oftentimes the communities need that government presence. They have too direct access to the businesses, and if they don't feel like something is being done immediately and as they would like it, they have access to the facilities to attack, unfortunately. So the private sector businesses bear the full brunt when sometimes it's an intervention that the government should have taken. You need to bear in mind that the private sector also pays a huge amount of tax, and a huge amount of the revenue goes back to government. Government has a strong role to play in that sector. So I can tell you that it's been very well received. Community leaders constantly asking for it. It's available on our website. The government has bought into it. We have a couple of private sector businesses already saying, yes, please avail us of it. And so the next step really for us is to, provide even more access to the document, training and all whatnot for the different stakeholders.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Bekeme. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and look at a different type of issue that has arisen during this COVID-19 period, during this lockdown. Earlier on in our show, we were actually speaking to another guest about how children may be exposed to more about sexual violence and the like, but also when we look at older people, women and younger adults, but definitely women, they have been exposed to more levels or increased levels of domestic violence with them being stuck at home, often with their abuser. How do you think women in those instances, in those who are having those experiences, how can they navigate this time?
It's a tough one, and again, it's something that we're working. Like you said, the World Bank pegs, women who are facing, violence, gender-based violence, as a conservative 1 out of 5. And I say conservative because a lot more women are facing that, and this is worse so in traditional societies where typically women are not expected to speak. Even I face the challenge when I have business meetings in a sector that is dominated by men. I go into meetings of 10 people and I'm the only woman, and they're usually like, okay, who is this small girl? And all of a small girl with 4. So, but that's the challenge that women typically face, in our traditional society. So first of all, we don't have enough women in the businesses in leadership positions. Secondly, in the communities themselves, women are marginalized. I'm part of a women extractives group, and there was the story of a young girl who was sexually abused, and the police in the area, just one police station in the entire community, and they were not even sensitized as to gender-based violence. So you can imagine that civil society organized are having to bear the burden of managing this. So I would say that it's really about creating more awareness for women. And again, we're being funded by Ford Foundation to address this in the coming months, to really provide access to training to those authority figures in the community. So for instance, the midwives who we then listen to even the men. So we're providing them training on understanding what gender-based violence is, human rights. We're training them on the CES as well, because the CES does recommend that women and youth should represent at least 30% of decision-making processes. And the reason why we're talking to women directly is oftentimes women don't even know that they have access to resources. Women oftentimes is something that they have to deal with, regardless of the pandemic, even though it's been said that it is now a shadow pandemic alongside the main pandemic of COVID. Even here in urban areas like Lagos, these are the challenges that women are facing. So what can women really do? I think that women for women to be able to take decisive steps, at least in huge numbers, women need to have resources to empowerment. Many women stay in abusive situations because they feel that they don't have alternative sources of income, and oftentimes, obviously, our cultural milieu also encourages them to stay, saying that, it will be over soon, manage it, you're a woman. So these are the people that we need to keep on to basically sensitize them to the fact that it is not okay for women to be in that situation, because many women die and make die if decisive action is not taken.
Well, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Mrs. Olowale, for joining us today on The Morning Show.